I'm Sharifa Taylor, and I am a NorCal researcher with Communities for a Better Environment, but I'm assigned to the East Oakland team.
I'm Esther Goolsby, NorCal co-program director. We're a statewide organization where we do work in four different communities, two in SoCal, Southeast LA, and the City of Wilmington, and we also in NorCal in East Oakland where we are right now, and in Richmond, California. So the key areas of our work is community-led, fighting environmental injustice. We also work for transformative organizing to where we can build the goods, no longer extract.
And the topic areas would be refinery pollution. It would also be industrial pollution, like AB&I, which is behind us and behind the schools. It would also be community resilience, so like resilience to natural disasters as well as human-made disasters, including wildfires.
A lot of areas under the umbrella of environmental justice.
Yeah, but like with more of a focus around air pollution with stationary and mobile sources.
Yes. Reducing pollution for our city, for the most impacted, one should start with not permitting the polluters, right? We need to understand the land use and the zoning and change that. And this general plan will help with that. And also community understanding what they have in their area so they can fight against it and let the so-called regulators and elected officials be responsible in which they should for people's health. And what else?
Yeah, one thing I would say is that for long-standing polluters, polluters who have been in the area for 20, 30, 50, 100 years, we want to make sure that we decommission these sites. It's an issue in Oakland, but also in other parts of California where we will have like oil drilling sites right next to a school, or we'll have an industrial plant, near a school within breathing distance, like we're, next to two schools now. And so it's important for us to make sure we not only decommission these sites, but also having industrial spare the air days when the air quality in and of itself is poor. And so making sure that we stand by those and institute those so that the people who are most affected can have a chance to get their breath back. One way that we can ensure that renters can live in safe sanitary homes is to make sure that, one, our zoning is set up properly. So there are many different zones for industry, and so we want to make sure we don't make those too close to residential or mixed use areas. When there are the options for businesses near homes, we want to make sure that they're beneficial businesses, kind of like grocery stores, instead of a heavy polluter. For newly built housing, we want to make sure that we have proper air filtration systems so that folks, regardless of their economic status, can be able to fight stationary and mobile sources of pollution. So whether they live by a factory or whether they live by a place that is affected a lot by trucking, which is common here in East Oakland, we want to make sure that people have access to that type of equipment that's really life-saving, especially during things like wildfire season. We also want to make sure that if it's not a newly built home, that people have access to the same equipment. And so we just want to make sure that it's something that people aren't going into debt for. Like they're not choosing between rent or food and being able to breathe or their medication. They're able to do it just like anyone else would be able to.
Yeah, you also got to make sure that the land that is built on is not toxic already, right? So yeah, not being next to mobile sources and stationary sources that contribute to people's health is that the actual land is not super funds and anything that will make them sick. The lead in the paint, right?
Hexavalent chromium.
Yeah, the soil that's nearby, the water that we're drinking, all of those things. And then again, I can't stress it enough, is that holding our elected and appointed officials accountable, the ones that are making these decisions, including the planning department, right? Because they play a huge part in still using the racist land use laws and zonings that contribute to our health.
We can make sure that all Oaklanders have access to healthy and affordable food by making sure that there are less areas that are food deserts. So it's very common to have corner stores that sell food, but not necessarily fresh produce. And so making sure that these stores are able to stock more fresh produce, making sure that it's consistently affordable, making sure that programs such as SNAP or CalFresh are available to more people, especially because the cost of living is higher here in California than it is across the country. And then making sure that food banks and other areas of food service that exist are easily accessible in these communities. We can make sure that everyone in Oakland has access to healthy green spaces, parks, and libraries by making sure that we take stock or inventory of places that don't have them now, and then making sure that as decisions are being made to build them in the future, that those are the areas we prioritize first. When we have buildings that are going into decline, we can make sure that if these spaces aren't in too much disrepair, that we can rehabilitate them to be used for things like libraries, food pantries, other stuff. We can also make sure that we have proper nonviolent enforcement of cleaning up parks and making sure that people aren't, using drugs or whatever in the parks so that people feel safe to go there. We can also make sure that we volunteer ourselves to clean up the parks and to make it more beautiful so that we do want to go and visit these spaces.
The environmental justice element is important, one, because it's way overdue. Right. The law passed, SB 1000, back in 2016, that allowed a environmental justice element to be included when a city works on their general plan. The City of Oakland are 30 years overdue on working on their plan. And so it's important because it's technically the document that runs the city. It is the document that the city is supposed to follow in order to make it healthy and habitable for our communities. And SB 1000, the EJ element, is highly important because environmental justice starts with environmental racism. And we've been battling this since slavery. And so right now, us being CBE, being able to be a part of, and other organizations that do environmental justice work in Oakland, are able to work on that along with community. So community actually gets a chance to be a part of this. Now, first you have to learn what all of this means, in which that's exactly what we do. And with that, you're able to be empowered even more than you already are, right? The community is already empowered as soon as they get activated, right? As soon as they learn what is in their neighborhoods and why it is designed as it is. Mm-hmm. And it's one, to keep the cycle going of you being unhealthy and you being the one that needs the medicine. We got nothing but the fast foods, which keeps you sick. When they learn that our closest local environment has been built using racist laws, they should be activated, honestly, because our sickness is not hereditary. It's hereditary because we live in the same places, because we eat the same food, because we're around the same air quality, especially here. And we have the same stressors. But here in East Oakland, where I have been since I was 16 years old, and I have asthma, I have COPD, because I live downwind from a foundry that's been there over 100 years. And now they're gone. So these next generations, like we're right here at this elementary, these children no longer have to breathe that air. even though they're right next to trucking.
The EJ element is so important because it gives us the opportunity to look at our past decisions and choose to move forward in a different direction in the future. It also forces us to look at each element of the general plan as we're developing it and think, hey, how does this affect the way that people live every day? How does it affect their quality of life? And how can we improve that? I also feel that the EJ element is important because it gives credence, or it gives attention to the issues that people have been advocating for so long, and it makes it so that the issues that people have been wanting to address all these years become actionable, and so that's something that we're looking forward to as this process continues, but also as we move into the implementation of these policies. We don't just want to write good things down, we want to make sure that we see the fruits of our labors in terms of changes in our community.
What we can do to make our communities more resilient in the face of the climate chaos, the disaster that's ahead of us, is to get prepared. So preparedness is key. And what that means is knowing, one, again, what is in your neighborhood, what's local, what's toxic in your neighborhood. How can you, your neighbors, your family get prepared? Also, I know I said this a lot of times, but your elected officials, the people that are making decisions for you, for your community, for your health, for them to understand. Really, another thing too is to organize, right? Organizing means that the more people, the more what you are demanding, and when you're demanding changes, right? And that's what this EJ element is also going to do. The changes that you need in your community. We're working on emergency preparedness. We're working on resilient hubs. We're working on just educating community on what is perceived to be in the future. It's tools that you can look at to see how hot it's gonna get, how the sea level rise is gonna get. So just really educating yourself on like where your home is compared to 20 years from now, and also try to make this community as healthy as possible right now in preparedness. So something simple as when you're planting trees, how your groundswell is, right? Get ready for the flooding that happens. Again, you gotta touch them resources and you gotta demand change. And the best way to do that is become a member of Communities for a Better Environment.
I would add that knowing where your resources are is one way to be resilient in the face of climate change. So that means like knowing where the sandbags are when it comes to flooding. That means having like community power, including organizing, but more specifically what folks did during the pandemic to be able to support one another during a really tough time is something we're going to have to do more as we move forward with climate change. We have certain resources now, but we may not have them in the future. And so making sure that it's not just I have this resource, it's my neighbor has access to this, my family has access to this, the person down the block has access to this. And being able to share those resources within your community is something that, something that's going to be really important in order to face the effects of climate change. So community members can get involved with the EJ element as it's being drafted, as well as the rest of the general plan, by staying informed about the newsletters that come out from the city. They email about every 2 weeks, so making sure to read those, read the revisions that are happening, making sure that if they're able to go to a meeting or able to respond in writing to something that they see, that they do that, making sure that when working groups or events pop up that they're able to be involved in those, participating with nonprofits like ourselves and other organizations like the West Oakland Indicator Project, APEN, others who are involved, and making sure that they're able to just be engaged and harness the power that we already have. One thing that we really have on our side is that the community is an expert just like the city or BACMed or any of these other agencies are. And one major and important way that community can get involved is ground truthing. It's important for the city and the other agencies involved in this process to not solely rely upon the reports that they're able to populate or the studies that they're able to refer to, but to be able to understand the truth of what it is like to live in the different communities in East Oakland and Oakland at large. It's one thing to call a community disadvantaged, but it's another thing to understand what that term really means or what it means to be in an EJ community. And so it's important to hear directly from residents themselves who have experienced the different forms of pollution their entire lives. It's important to hear as well, what things were like before and how we can move it forward in the future. And so ground truthing is essential to this process, and I would say that's the number one way that communities can get involved. But that's also a way that the document itself can be strengthened so that it's not so much history from an outsider's perspective, but it's telling the on-the-ground truth, the history of what it's like to be an Oakland resident.
So we're at the end, and right here is the elementary's playground, in which right here, this whole long blue metal building is A&R Trucking Company. And so those are diesel trucks while the children are playing on the playground. And then if you look far in the back, that's AB&I Foundry that operated over 100 years in this neighborhood. The end of last year, they officially shut down in October of 2022. And so they were one of our campaigns that we fought against because of the pollutants that they emitted, and this community here for decades suffered from.